Welcome back, boys. Today we have one from Chris Williamson.
As a guy who has spent a lot of time studying history, how unusual do you think that the time we're living in right now is?
We are the most absurd era in history by a very significant margin. And I can get into why I think that's true. I think there's only under there's one easy underlying variable that explains all of it. But I invented an acronym called SAW, and SAW is Studies in Ancient Wisdom. And what that means to convey is that there's an underlying shared truth that all the world religions share, all the world's folkways going back thousands of years, and then this is corroborated by modern evidence. And I think this podcast is a great example. You might be like the one of the biggest SAW content creators, where what you do is you compare ancient teachings with what modern science says. And so there is a strong tether between the two. And the 20th century is just a bizarre century, and that's true for about a dozen different reasons. The 20th century established different intellectual precedents as it related to mating, as it related to the idea of community, the nation, religion, how economic conditions worked. And so you could kind of call it the blue pill era of history from roughly the world wars until COVID or now. And it's really the century of social engineering. So our era of history is incredibly bizarre. And the irony is that we judge everyone else according to our standard, but our standard is incredibly strange. And so I like to say that a fish in a pond cannot know its place in the world because it only knows the water. And that we are that fish. And the reason we don't study history is because if we started looking for what it taught us, we'd realize we're doing something very, very wrong.
How so?
Oh, a variety of ways. The largest example, and something I frequently like to say, is the idea that's killed the most people in history is the idea that humans are inherently perfectible, where the crisis that started, or the world wars in the 20th century's totalitarianism, killed over 150 million people. And that's larger than anything else it's in any way comparable in history. And that was based upon the assumption that you can break and mold human nature to be whatever you want. And the blank slate, or the idea that all people are born the same, all people are born with the same capabilities, sounds nice on paper, but in reality, its immediate next jump is totalitarianism, to socially engineer people to reach whatever aim you would like. And that's just one.
Yeah, that's kind of what they have to believe in, what they have to believe in to treat people like this, to continue to go forward the way things are going. That if you don't believe in it, then you kind of stop and think like, what is the best for people?
One example where there's so many of these. The idea of infinite financial progress, no matter what. This is the idea the left holds up a lot, which is the left sees money as something to divide, not something to create. The reality is money is created every single year by people producing it. And if you look at most of history, most of civilization, stagnation is the norm. You have an empire rise, the empire exploits the peasants, they grow weak, they fall, barbarians restart the process. Only for pretty small slivers of history, including ours, for creating up certain incentive structures, do you see very rapid progress, but we take that completely for granted.
So, economically, very unique. What else would be in the the top rungs?
So the idea that men and women are psychologically the same, which is something that our ancestors would view as completely ridiculous. And we view our ancestors as stupid. Our ancestors, if they saw us, if you took a Greek philosopher or a medieval philosopher and brought them to our day, they would say that we had a weird combination of autism and schizophrenia, where the thing with there's a lot of psychology about this, but we have very few records of autism or schizophrenia from the pre-industrial world, where the mental illnesses a society has are driven by the social structure that in the neuroses it puts in the society. So in the Middle Ages, after the Black Death, you would have entire towns break up into dancing as the sort of mania, or people would become witches, or people would have demonic possession. So different society, different psychological neuroses. I have a friend who is an anthropologist in Cambodia for a bunch of years, and the natives in Cambodia, they literally saw magic in their daily lives. So that's an example. They saw magic, they believed in witchcraft completely, and that was just an obvious part of their worldview. And that's something that separates us from the past, where every single other society in history, and even people in pretty recent history like Charles Darwin, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, Karl Marx, Queen Victoria, believed in the spirit world. Belief in the spirit world was completely common among educated people until around 1900. And so to just go through the list, the idea that history doesn't have any lessons to teach us, that's modern. Men and women are the same. That culture doesn't matter. That genetics doesn't vary across differing populations. That human nature is perfectible. That there is no divine. That there is no spirit world. That economic progress is assured. That war will end, and that basically that war is unnecessary. Where the past had this very you could call it realistic sense of the world, where they didn't. Modernity is motivated by this concept that if we get it right, we can break the entire game and win forever.
Mhm.
And the rest of history would view that as completely insane. And I think one of the biggest things my channel talks about is I think we are on the edge.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something interesting about the displeasure and the sort of disgust that some elements of the far left have with a big chunk of the West, which is white guys. You know, if you're a white man, you are the very, very bottom of the victimhood hierarchy. You get no points at all. You had this quote, which I really thought was interesting. Don't gloat over your conquered foe. It gains you nothing and makes the conquered more dangerous.
Yeah.
And that to me is indicative of this really sort of, well, actually, just explain that quote to me. Like, why was that so interesting?
I mean, if you look at the history of empires, it's obvious. Like, if you want to conquer someone, you need to kind of have a relationship with them. It doesn't have to be a good relationship, but let's look at the British Empire as an example. When the English subjugated the Irish and the Scottish, they gave them social status if they fought for the empire. You could be an Irish or a Scottish guy, go to India, and you'd be treated like an English person. That was a way to get rid of all of the aspirational, aggressive young Irish and Scottish guys. With the Romans, if they conquered you, you were a sharp young guy. They would let you into Roman culture. And so when you conquer someone, you still have a relationship
You
with
assimilate in some way.
Exactly. And the left always really shocks me because their complete lack of strategy is insane, where they do not look at the left's great strength is the ability to manipulate people, where they can, especially women, the left has like 10 different hooks in the collective psyche of women that they can pull from to get them to do what they want. They're horrible at grand strategy, though. And it's really shocking where they just set up their entire coalition. That their coalition building is really bad, which is, I could explain that if you'd like. And so they've established no incentive for white men to cooperate inside the system, and they keep on ritually humiliating them. I don't think this would be this bad if the left didn't turn every single vector of culture into ritual humiliation of white men. Even if they just let Hollywood not be woke, I think it would make things a lot better. But normies can't not ignore Hollywood. And I'm going to throw this point in here. We're at a point where the democratically elected governments of the West are purposely committing civilizational suicide. If we've reached this threshold and we can't talk about it, something's very wrong. Where the governments of the West, a lot of them are doing degrowth, to degrow an industrialized economy. They're bringing in immigrants not out of economic self-interest, but to replace the local population. They're trying to like over-regulate the economy. They're trying to get rid of Western heritage and Western culture, and even destroy statues of the West's former leaders. The point of this is not it's not some sort of warped self-interest. It's suicide. We are a civilization that's openly committing suicide.
In other news, this episode is brought to you by Nomadic. Traveling should be about the journey, not the out. I saw an interesting one of the 3 morning takes from Pirate Wise today, talking about this guy that's coming up with technology. Is it sulfur technology that they spray into the atmosphere to reflect the sun's rays away? So basically we can curtail some of the effect of carbon emissions in the atmosphere and global warming by getting up above the carbon reflection and reflecting it back before it comes down to the earth. And this has been loudly denounced by all of the pro-green environmental movements. And it was the theory on pirate wires. The reason for that is that it cuts off at the knees the degrowth movement.
Yes, exactly. That's the so I was talking to some people I know, and they asked me, they're from the Northeast. They said, do Texans feel guilty for using air conditioning all year? And I said, no chance. It's a non-negotiable for this to be an industrialized civilization. If Texas didn't have AC, we'd be having this conversation in Pennsylvania or California. And
it's a vital system.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the crazy thing is that, so the reason they're pushing against air conditioning, and air conditioning, do you explain this further? You could nuke the entirety of Northwestern Europe and it would have little effect on carbon emissions. The thing that really is pushing carbon emissions is China and India installing 100 factories every second, 100 coal-powered factories every second. If you really cared about fixing the climate, you would build nuclear power. France or Hungary are mostly driven off nuclear power. But the point, and I just released a video on the Unabomber, and the thesis I say with the video is that there are psychological pressures implicit to industrial civilization that we don't understand that create psychological issues, which mean that people are actively pushing for the death of civilization. And the reason I think is I don't think humans, this is a whole different tangent. I don't think humans evolved to live outside villages. I don't think humans evolved to live in cities and away from the earth. And so I think it creates weird psychological pressures. And it's not a coincidence that the places that have been industrialized for the longest, such as the northeastern US, the Netherlands, Britain, are the places they're trying to commit civilizational suicide. Because I think industrial civilization, we haven't figured out the cultural compatibility with it in the same way that for the invention of agriculture 10,000 years ago, looking through the archaeological record, we find that there were very rapid fluctuations in population. Population goes up, crashes by 80%, goes up again, crashes by 60%. That happened a couple times as agriculture was inventing because people didn't know how to deal with an agricultural society. I think that.
What do you think happened? What causes so many people to pass?
This is super cool. So you know how when the Europeans came to the New World, the diseases wiped out the natives? The reasoning for that is that from the period between 10,000 BC and 5,000 BC, the Europeans or Eurasians started dealing with domesticated animals like cows and pigs, and almost all of our diseases are from domesticated animals. And so what happens, you're living with them very closely, is that you get all these diseases. So agriculture was invented in 10,000 BC. The first cities were around 4,000 BC. The world's population was stagnant even after the invention of agriculture long term because we were hit by so many waves of diseases that we didn't evolve for. So the Eurasians went through this disease gradient that wiped out the Native Americans who didn't have domesticated animals in the 10,000 BC to 5,000 BC period. So I would say disease is the biggest cause, but we also know that agriculture was spread by genocide. And so it's very difficult to get a non-agricultural population to take in agriculture. And so like the Middle Easterners genocided a lot, the western half of Asia against the native peoples, but we have archaeological records that the native peoples could launch, the native hunter-gatherer peoples were able to launch counterattacks that could wipe out hundreds of miles of farmers.
A lot of criticism of the left, and perhaps rightly so. What is the right getting wrong mostly in your view? What did they face planting around?
That's a great question. The video I'm writing now is the anthropology of the left. The video I'm going to write next is the anthropology of the right. And so I study the left and the right as if they were tribes in the Amazon or the Congo. I look at the demographics that formed them, their philosophic assumptions, their strengths and weaknesses. The right has no shared coherent ideology. The right doesn't. Thomas Sowell has said that the right is whatever the left isn't. So if you look at conservatives, you have the Taliban, you have libertarians, you have Nazis, you have monarchists, you have religious fundamentalists, you have classical liberals. These people share nothing except the left's coherent vision of the world. The future is whatever the left says, and the conservatives build their worldview off a past that never really existed. And so when we're talking at the right, we're talking about different factions. I think the boomer cons and the old school right are frankly like, am I allowed to swear in the show?
Of course.
Oh yeah, they're cucks. Like the boomer cons are cucks. They don't go hard enough. They don't have any concept of what's going on in the world. The new right are sociopaths. The Christian right is delusional. Yeah, you can just give me factions and I can criticize them.
Well, it seems to me, at least looking at good portions of the right, maybe more sort of the manosphere right,
Yeah.
the sort of young men's movement, there is so much fucking cynicism.
Yeah.
It is a very uninspiring movement to be a
Yeah.
part of.
Exactly. I say the biggest issue of the new right is that the biggest issue of our entire society is it lacks a soul. There's a wonderful book by an Orthodox theologian that says the modern world is divided between those who numb itself to its meaninglessness through various substances and various hedonisms and those who realize it and go crazy. Exactly.
Yeah. I just, that when I look at a lot of even the sort of more right-leaning content at the moment, even the hopeful messages are guised within you have to do this because if you don't do this, then everything's going to go to shit.
Yeah.
Like your hopefulness is kind of delivered at the end of a barrel of a gun.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's just depressing. And the thing I see with a lot of the new right is it's very cynical. You're right. It lacks any sense of inner authenticity or inner truth. And it's funny, the people who tell you to be authentic are the least authentic people in the world. Some random redneck from my hometown in Pennsylvania is much more authentic than a person who says, be yourself, love yourself, be authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it also gets stuck on weird points where, like, this is a big issue. We've lost the ability to change settings. And so the new right obsesses over a couple different topics, like abortion or the Jews or physical fitness, or just hatred of the left. And they lose the ability to see the bigger picture. And they're upset. Every ideology now is hyper-materialist in that it only sees things from their material good, and it lacks any concept of the inner soul or character of things. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's a lot of desperate people who look for some kind of hedonism as a way to get out of desperation because they don't have a better idea.
Yeah, I wonder what the combination of extreme cynicism with a fractured, fragmented sort of inner group is. I'm always really cautious. This is one of I've got 4 rules of how you can tell if a content creator is being honest and truthful. One of them is their in-group bound together over the mutual hatred of an out-group or the mutual love of their in-group?
Yes.
And I think I see an awful lot of, at both sides, their identification is, we don't know what we are necessarily,
exactly.
but we know that we're not that, and that is the other side.
Yes, exactly. It's why for my channel, I've said that the value that I try to build my channel around is honor, because I said the right now is based around hatred of the left. And I say a lot of the factions of the right they're a rationalization for killing people. And I think that's going to end up in a very bad place. So you need to create an active value. And so it's why I said, we stand for when I released one of my videos, I said, honor, truth, and freedom. And I think those are important values. And I think that we're in a winnowing event for political content creators. I don't think 80% will make it in the next 3 years. I think we're going to see.
Not if this fucking 2024 keeps going the way it is. Dude, I think that the last 4 weeks has been the highest revenue for the guys that are like balls deep in the political. Daily Wire, for instance.
Yes.
I would wager money that they have made more cash in the last month than they will have ever made before.
Damn, that's cool.
The left, how did the left end up getting so feminine in that way? Why are there no strong masculine figures standing with the working class?
That's really a great question. So in the video that I'm writing now and I'm gonna release in the next week, I split the left into the Western left and the Eastern left. The Eastern left is Marxism. The Western left is our left. It goes back to the French Revolution. And so you have a thinker, there was a thinker in 1820s or 1810s France called Saint-Simon. Saint-Simon pushed for liberating the third world to launch a revolution in the first world, the destruction of sex and trans. He pushed for the creation of a new man, creating a religion of science where you built secular rituals to worship the experts, and the breakdown of creation of complete equality. So everything in the left today you can find in French thinkers from the Revolution 200 years ago. That you can view a tremendous amount of the current left as a resentful, spurned lover against the working classes, because the aim of the working classes was largely to get more money, and the left saw the working classes as this wedge to get them into power. And the leftist elite is all either basically academics or thugs, and this was earlier communist. The communist elite was either academics. Then when the revolution worked, the thugs killed the academics. Stalin and Castro and Mao were literally like bandits for parts of their lives. And what happened with the spurning of the working classes is that the left redirected towards women, and women were a demographic.
Interesting. What do you guys think about this? Spoke a lot about, yeah, politics and stuff. Man, this is it's nice to hear about. Anyway, boys, I see you boys on the next one. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I catch you boys on the next one. Take care of yourself.